Hey friends, very good afternoon and welcome back to the channel. In this week's festive themed live stream, after all, it is the 15th of December today, I thought we'd make it a bit of a fun one, using some Christmas samples as a starting point for a new track idea, maybe a remix, maybe a whole new thing. Let's see what I can come up with in a couple of hours. If you fancy giving the sample challenge a go yourself and sharing the results with us, I'll put a link after today's stream in the video description where you can download the same pack of samples that I'm using today. I'll also let you know where you can share your track to if you like as well. As always, feel free to drop your questions in the chats and we'll learn and discover new things together. My goal, as always, on the channel here is to help you level up your skills and become a better music producer. So without further ado, let's dive in. As always, we're going to run a little bit of a test here just to check that we've got some audio. If you're joining the stream, by the way, do drop a comment, say hello. As I said, if you've got any questions, pop them in there. Let's do a quick test and make sure we've got some audio here. So it's all looking good this end. That's a little unreleased track of mine. It'd be great if what we do today turns out sounding like that, right? So let's start with the samples that we're going to be messing around with today. As I said, it's just some free kind of Christmas samples. Got a little bit of a folder here called Christmas Sample Challenge, and in there, here are some of the free packs or free folders of sounds. If you're going to do something like making a track from samples, and today I really am planning to sort of build the track from just samples. That is everything: the kick drum, clap, hi-hats, bass line, whatever sort of melodic type stuff we have, all from these samples. So if you're going through sample packs like this, and just by the way, obviously when you're working with samples like this, you can very easily substitute any of them for a better sample or a synth or an instrument. But the idea of doing something like these kind of challenges is to learn something new, learn something about your effects, learn something about working with audio, learn something about how you can process these sounds and make them work the way you want them to work. So I think it's a good exercise. It's not going to be easy, but that's, you know, getting outside your comfort zone is a good thing to do, in my opinion. So if we're listening through these samples here, we're kind of listening out for anything that could inspire us in terms of, you know, percussion or harmonics, where we could think, hey, we might be able to use that for X. And I think it's often easy in these sort of packs to find things that you could use for percussion, but maybe not so obvious what could be turned around and become your instruments for, as I said, the bass line or a melody or a chord or something like that. So let's just have a quick listen to what we've got here. So we've got the good old Santa Claus vocal. Pencil or pen pushing on paper and a table. That could be interesting with some percussion. Some reindeer trots. Some obvious, very obvious Christmas sounds in sleigh bells. Shopping in a mall. It's an interesting one. So I could start kind of bookmarking a few of these samples, make a mental note. I mean, that one to me that I've just sort of clicked on here with this grazing carrots, that sounds like hi-hats to me. So I'm just going to put a little note over here and we'll grab that one. That could be turned into later something like a cymbal crash or some hi-hats or something. Let's carry on. Okay, so some nice fireplace crackling sounds on Christmas Eve. More sleigh bells. Okay, a bit of a weird one. What is that called? Santa sneaking in to leave presents under. Okay. Cool. Okay, so lots of percussion type stuff. That one there is also interesting. I'm going to do something with his voice there. So I think definitely there's plenty of stuff there that could be used for percussion. Let's have a look at what we've got in here. Okay, so Deck the Halls, bit of a brass sample. That's definitely going to get some usage for sure. And then what else have we got in here? Some one-shots, I think, or... Okay, some more sort of sleigh bell type stuff. That could be interesting. Not much going on in that last one. More bells. It's also, that could be a really interesting kind of Atmo layer. Okay, these pine cones are kind of perfect for percussion, so let's have both of those over here. So yeah, essentially that will get us started, I think. So what I want to do, I can actually get rid of my tester track now for today. I want to kind of set a couple of rules here. I'm thinking I will use sometimes an audio track with just the audio on an audio track. In this case, I've just put these here now just to remind me about these particular samples, but actually mainly what I think we can learn from today is using lots of sort of sampling and resampling and instruments and stuff. So in that sense, I'm going to try and, as I said, avoid any samples that we already know work really, really great. We're just using from this pack, these packs. We're not going to use any synths other than wavetable could be an option because we could add our own audio as the oscillator in wavetable. So that could be one option there. And also we're going to definitely work with the brand new drum sampler that we have in Ableton 12.1. So let's go and grab ourselves one of those. Let's have a drum sample on this MIDI track over here. We're going to be using those for sure. And then we'll be using simplers and lots of those and then processing. So let's start with the very first drum sampler and let's see if we can come up with a kick. And let's say we keep the tempo at the moment, which was the same as the track that I started the test run with. Let's leave it at 122. We can move that around. So let's go back to our pack and let's listen out for just something percussion wise maybe. I did hear something in here, maybe this letter envelope. Where did I see something about a letter or the penning, the writing of the letter? So maybe in here. That could be a kick, or there was something I saw with sneaking. Yeah, believe it or not, we could maybe try that as well. There's plenty of harmonics in there. So what I'm going to do straight away with the drum sampler, so the first one here, we're going to just try and make a kick. Okay, so let's put a few tools on this track as well. Let's have a utility, let's have an EQ8, build up some things that we can use. What else do we want? We might use the utility in mono, so we'll switch it across to mono. Maybe we'll do that in a moment so you can kind of see the idea behind that. We could also have a compressor here, so maybe a bit of glue compressor. These are kind of things that are going to definitely help us get this to sound probably good. Those kind of tools. So back to the pack, and let's drag in this one down into the drum sampler here, and let's move our start point along till we get near to the start of that sound. And with the drum sampler, a little trick for you here is if you hold down your shift key on the keyboard, when you move this start, you can see that actually you can dial right in to the sound itself, right? So if you're zoomed out, you won't be able to do that, but you can see here I'm now able to kind of zoom right in and move myself around a bit. So I'm also going to bring the transposition all the way down to 48 semitones. So we're going to start with it really, really low and see what happens. We'll also maybe use a pitch MIDI effect in the front so we can repitch the sound up and down. Let's go to our kick track. Let's throw in just a simple 4 on the floor pattern for a second, and let's hit play. And now we're going to move that start point around. Looking out for a little bit of a kick. And then we're going to adjust our hold and decay a bit. So if you want a real short percussion sound. And the beauty about using the drum sampler is that we've got all the access to all of the FX section, which is great. So we can kind of modify directly in here a bit how that would sound. So let's have a look at the EQ8 and sort of see where our pitch is currently. So we're kind of here. So we're at an E2 right way up at 150. So we need to go a lot lower. So let's come down. If we start by coming down an octave, we're getting a little bit closer, right? We're down here at about 82 hertz now, so a little bit further. So we're now down at 24 and we've got our E0. Now I'm thinking I'd quite like I'm going to keep it in a simple white note scale. So I'm going to go for not 24 like exactly an octaves. We know it's an E. I'm going to move this to something like a G kick. So let's say we're going to be at 21 semitones down. And that should, hovering my mouse over here, more or less be giving us a G0 kick, right? So I'm just using the EQ to help me sort of figure that out. Let's also just give ourselves a bit more of a boost on the levels for the stream. We'll turn that down again later, just so you can hear what we've got so far. So we've got this sound from this little very high-pitched, weird kind of Santa sound that I've kind of zoomed right in on. And for now, just choosing this little section of it, right? And we pitched it down into a sort of area where our kick can be. So let's now maybe use the EQ. We could have a bit of a steep low cut, just to get rid of any junk here. And then let's make a bell curve at our G0, which is around 48 hertz. And let's boost that frequency. Let's go back there. Right, we're trying to pull that kick kind of note out of there. So already that's made a big difference, right? We've kind of found our frequency, pitching all this sample down, and now we're kind of boosting that frequency an awful lot, but in this case it's okay. We're not working with already a kick drum, right? We're working with some kind of weird, just reminding ourselves of the original sample that we're working with here. It's this, right? So like a little tiny squeak. Doesn't sound anything like a kick, and it's very high pitched, but it has some interesting harmonics. So we've now got this kind of kick sound. We could also use the filter inside to round it off if we want kind of an analog vibe kind of kick. Could boost the resonance if we want a little bit more harmonics where the filter cuts off. I'm going to keep the punch for now. We could also use a pitch envelope in the FX section. So this is the beauty of the drum sampler. So I'm happy with the tone, like where we've started. I'm happy with that. Let's have a look, for example, for a second with the, I'm just going to use my friendly isotope plugin, the Ozone Imager. Let's have a look what's going on in there. So we've got a bit of kind of nasty kind of phasing or something going on in the sides here. So let's see if we can clean that up with the utility over here. So let's turn on the utility, because it feels to me like you can also see on the volume of the track that it's a little bit left-sided in terms of the phase, or the volume is louder on the left. So that's much better. Let's try the right. So we're just flipping the polarity a little bit. Let's say we go left polarity bias, and then we'll bring it into mono. That's much better. So we've now got the kick kind of, yeah, really nicely and focused. You can hear the big difference if I take off the left phase in mono, the left polarity switch. Sounds awful and thin. So that's pretty good. Let's maybe give a bit of compression. And you might be thinking, why do all of this? Well, it's just a good exercise. You see, you're learning lots of things here about how we can use all these tools to make a sample sound the way we want to make it sound. And we've got a unique kick drum at this point in time, that's for sure. Let's maybe have a little ghost note in here. So a bit of groove. So if we were going to use the FX section here, we could go for something like the punch. Which increases that kick drum kind of punch. We could have the FM. With this sample, it'd need to be very low. We could also have a bit of ring mod. And we could also go for the sub oscillator. And that's the one I think that makes the most sense here. Adrian, how you doing, my friends? Welcome to today's stream. Bit of a different one today, just a bit of a sample challenge where I'm using this kind of fairly innocuous would be the right word, samples, all from free Christmas samples that are floating around on the internet, and just trying to make a track from scratch using just stuff from these sample folders. So I'm sure it'll make sense in a moment. So right now we've got this kind of weird sounding is the first sample we've used, and we put that into a drum sampler and we're kind of turning it into a kick drum. This is what we've got so far. And I think the sub oscillator in here is good because it sort of thickens up the kick a little bit. And I feel like we could add some more harmonics to it, but that's a good enough start for now. So we've got ourselves a kick drum, great. So let's move on to another MIDI track, and let's go for something like a clap. So let's just have a couple of hits on the 2 and 4, and let's grab ourselves another sample from in the sample folder here. And let's try this time, this Santa writing a letter. Let's do a similar thing. Let's have a drum, and let's have a drum sampler, and we'll drop that onto this track. And let's go back to the samples, and let's have this Santa writing a letter down in here. And let's move our sample start point. And again, I'm just going to use my trick which I showed you where you can zoom in to see the sample start point. Just hold shift on your keyboard in the sampler and then move the start, sample start. And let's, in this case, with the snare, it's already got a bit of a clap tone to it there. let's add in the FX section in the drum sample, let's add the noise to this. So we're going to turn it into a bit like a sort of 808-ish tone first. So that's the tone we have right now. Pretty cool. And let's add the noise from in here. Already a decent-ish kind of sounding clap snare, I think. Let's bring up the volume on the sample, and then that's going to give our fader a little bit more adjustment. So that's going to sound nice with some reverb behind it and some EQ. Let's EQ it a little bit. So we're going to cut away any excess low end. And let's go to our kick track, and we're going to borrow a couple of things from there, some of our processing. So let's have the imager. We're going to check what our clap looks like. Let's also have, we could have a bit of compression as well. We'll adjust that in a moment. So that's not too bad. We've not got any of the nasty phasing like the previous sample. It's okay in terms of its sides. It's got a little bit of stereo to it. We're going to actually make that a little bit more. We could maybe just bring it in a little bit with a utility. Which, if we now look at the image, it will just mean that it's, the more we come round towards mono, but again, we could also just check the polarity here. So definitely left, not good, or right phase. So I think, yeah, literally, I think we'll leave that as it is, just to check what's going on in the sample. Doesn't hurt. There's nothing that I see that unlike the kick, which really needed, the sample needed a lot of work, or needed the shifting of the phase, the polarity, to help it to work properly. So let's have some reverb here. And if we wanted, we could repitch this, also this sound that we're using as our clap. Right. And let's, last but not least, let's just play around a little bit here as I program these hits with a little bit of timing. And let's also give them a bit of velocity, randomization. So they have a little bit of vibe to them. Just going to switch out reverb for now, probably when we get some more sounds in. It needs a little bit, but just not as much as that. Let me try just needs a much shorter reverb. That'll do. That's a little bit better. So just using the return reverb in Ableton, which has got a shorter decay. This has, quite a long decay in it, so it just sounds a bit too big. We want a nice sort of tight little drum sort of reverb on this. So we've got a clap and a snare going. So what about now, we could maybe do one more drum sound here, have something like a bit of a hi-hat perhaps. Just going to have a sip of my tea while I'm doing that. So over here on this track earlier, I kind of, in the sample folders again, there were these pine cones in this pack. I even like the extra little bit of hit that happens on that. So let's open up a new MIDI track. Let's just do a bit of labeling here as well. That's going to be now the clap for our idea today. This one's going to be some hi-hats. And let's say that we're going to grab the drum sampler again, or we could use just a sampler, it doesn't really matter. So maybe actually what we'll do this time, we'll just use a normal sampler, a simpler, down in this one. And let's have some kind of groovy hi-hats. So we'll have a little bit of a fill of sorts, some offbeat hits in the typical place, and we'll definitely have a little bit of velocity change on these in and around. So actually just did that the wrong way. So let's try that again. We might move this one this side actually, just have a little bit of groove like that. And let's go looking in here for our kind of hi-hat. I kind of like the tail on these, which is why I'm sort of not going for the obvious kind of most cleanest, loudest, because I kind of like that this has that little bit of kind of tail to it. So what do I mean by that? When you look in, it's sort of almost like a shaker. Let's get in here with the ADSR of this. Again, do we want to repitch it at all? Maybe a little bit. Just going to soften the attack a little bit. Also going to do that with the clap actually as well. We do have a little bit of already a slightly softer attack. That's going to help that kick really punch through there. Okay, on the hi-hat track, let's get an EQ in here. EQ is very important when you're working with samples like this. Everything needs kind of cleaning up and kind of putting in their frequency range. To be honest, it looks quite good actually. That sound doesn't have a lot of junk down here, but if you're working with, you know, random sort of audio to make your individual tracks like this from, you'll often need to make sure that you certainly use an EQ to clean things up. I think what could be interesting here on this sound as well would be a little bit of erosion. And a bit of noise. So we can add our own character there, as subtle or as strong as we want. So again, we're not getting such a clean sample here, we're getting a little bit more vibey. Can make it subtle. Move the move where it's engaging on the sound. So yeah, we're getting a little bit of a groove going here. So we're going to jump into the more harmonic melodic stuff in a moment. We're just building out a nice little groove here. Gonna have a sip of tea. By the way, if you've got any questions, do drop them in the chat. Adrian, it's great to see you back. Do say hello. If you're here in the live stream, let me know how you're doing. How goes your Sunday? How goes your weekend? How goes your music? Let me know. And if you've got any questions about Ableton Live or what I'm doing here, working with samples, any suggestions, things you'd like to see, feel free to shoot them in there. The idea today, as I said, it's a sample challenge, just kind of showing you getting out of the comfort zone, turning innocuous kind of sounds that are in this Christmas sample pack into something that hopefully sounds like a decent track by the end of it, or an idea starting out, an idea from that. And as I said, what does it do? kind of teaches us all sorts of things, how to process sounds, how to clean them up, how to use some of the effects, and just how to make things out of almost nothing, but something that didn't really sound that great in the start. Okay, and we're also using plenty of the drum sampler, plenty of the simpler, and we might use a bit of wavetable. We could also use granulator. We're trying to set some rules here as well. We're not grabbing already made samples, and we're not grabbing presets and synths and things. We're trying to build it from what we have here, which is just these simple samples, right? So another MIDI track. I can actually get rid of some of these tracks. Let me just see which one of these did I use. Was it Pine Cones 2? I did. So the other one there. So I've used that. This one I haven't used yet. So those tracks there are just over there to remind me when I listened earlier to the samples, what ones kind of sounded interesting. So there's one with carrots, grating carrots here, this one here. So what does that sound like again from the pack? Let's have a quick listen. It was in this one. And I kind of could hear in here some more hi-hats, perhaps more like an open hi-hat. So let's go down. Here it is, grating carrots. So you've just got to use your imagination, which I think is kind of the fun part, right? It's like, okay, you know, what could we do with that? So it's kind of like using your imagination. So again, I'm going to get rid of the audio track. Grating carrots is now in here. Let's try again, just an offbeat hi-hat. We might try and pitch it so it's a bit different to the other in a moment. Let's also, again, make sure that we've got a little bit of vibe on the velocity of it. And let's have a listen. And let's move our sample start around till we find something good. Quite like there is a bit of an open sort of hi-hat. Zoom right in. Pick a zero crossing point there. Let's roll the attack a little bit off, stain down. Make sure we can hear it working together with the other hi-hat, which is a good thing if you are here in the stream with me watching. Here's a great little tip for you straight away. Looking at these two now hi-hat tracks, they're both actually a little bit louder in volume on one side than the other. Looking at the left and right channels, and this is great because it's almost what I'm kind of checking right now is how do these two sounds sit together and make sure they are working well together. And they work pretty good together, but what's great here is we've got a natural pair that can be panned apart from each other. So if you find something that you can pan, that's a good sample to pan, and there's a pair that does a sound that does the opposite. So this particular grating carrot sound is louder on the right hand side on the right channel, and this one is louder on the left. Well, that's great. I'm actually going to follow the louder side in both cases. So we're going to move that hi-hat bit over to the left, and we're going to move this one a bit over to the right. We get that lovely separation, and that's going to help everything sit together in a bit more space. Let's have a little bit of reverb on these sounds as well. Just using Ableton's built-in send and return reverb. Okay, on the grating carrots, let's get a bit of a check. Could really turn this into a bit of a rack, to be honest. So let's maybe actually do that. Let's have the compressor. Let's make a little rack. we can copy and paste elsewhere. So what I kind of want is something that I'm going to use quite a lot today. As I said, EQ for cleaning up any junk on these samples, because these are just raw sounds. They're not anything processed already. We're going to make sure the sound is sitting how we want it to sit. So EQ is important. Compression can be great to glue the sound together. And also what I want to use is my friend, the free ozone imager from iZotope. Costs you an email at iZotope, and you can grab this little tool. It's a great little tool here. So let's have a look at the grading carrots now. So there is a lot of junk down low that we're going to get rid of. And let's have a look on the imager. Well, again, this one, no nasty major phase issues, a little bit of stereo, a little bit more stereo than the other hi-hat. That's all going to sit together nicely in terms of mixing, which is great. Let's also maybe high cut this one. Just listen to the other hi-hat it's playing with. Let's set it slightly lower than that one. So the other hi-hat is coming through above here. And let's actually go to that one. And in the EQ, let's actually give it a high shelf a bit. We'll just bring that out. So there's lots of EQ adjustment in working with these kind of samples as well to get the sound you're looking for. Let's have less erosion. Let's come back to the grading carrots, and as I said, let's just put these two in a rack. I made my adjustment a bit too soon, but what I want is those two there. Well, let's at least put those in a rack. And I'm going to copy that rack back over to the other hi-hats, which currently looks like this. Let's give that a bit of compression. Just a gentle bit. Yeah, I'm liking that setting there. Just to tighten that up a little bit. Nice. Back over to the grading carrots one. So we've deliberately now sort of set that down a bit lower than the other hi-hats. So the original hi-hat here is owning the top space. This one's a little bit lower. Again, getting a nice sort of envelope, get it nice and glued in. All right, so we've got a decent little drum groove going. All just with pine cones, grading carrots, kind of weird sounds so far, but we've got a bit of a, let's say, open hat, a bit of a closed hat. In fact, the closed hat is almost sounding a bit shakerish, which I kind of like. As I said, I really like the tail on it, was what attracted me to it in the first place. So it kind of has this longer tail. So kind of like that, and I've kind of preserved that and I've kept that. Okay, so now we're going to work our way along, and the fun stuff starts in the sense of we're looking for now a bit of like melodies and bass lines and kind of things like that. Start to get into the harmonic side of it. So the Deck the Halls sample, which is some brass. Let's just remind ourselves of what that sounds like, what we're doing today. So it's in the other folder here, and it sounds like this. All right, so we get the picture, right? We've got this kind of nice brass Deck the Halls performance going on. So we're going to try and use that to come up with chords and a bass line. I think today we're going to try and stay in a white note scale, so maybe A minor would be a choice. If we're going to stay minor, we could have kept it C major as well. They are relatives of each other, but let's try and maybe keep it simple tuning wise. And let's now grab ourselves a new MIDI track, and we're going to drop onto that our brass down here, so we can get rid of this audio track now. As I said, we're trying not also just to slap these in audio and be done with that. We're trying to sort of think out the box a little bit. Let's duplicate this twice, and on one of these, as I said, we might try and do some sort of like chords perhaps. So let's start with just a C3, a middle C3, so we know we've got our middle piano note going. And let's see about what the tuning of wherever we stop is going to be. So what we need to do a little bit is, let's just set this up. So we're going to drop a tuner in behind here, because right now we have no idea, like if we're playing a C, and this is a sampler workflow. So again, learning here today, as much as this is a fun sort of quirky one, making a track out of some kind of obscure samples, there's also plenty of content to take away in the sense of what can you learn from doing this. So if we put this brass Christmas sample in this simpler, we have no clue at this point in time what kind of key or scale or tuning that is. So what we're going to try and do, which is what we're doing here with this C3 note at the moment, just putting a middle C note in the piano roll. And what we want to do ideally is end up with a middle C showing up here in the tuner at some point when we stop at a point in this sample where we think we like the tone. What I'm going to do as well is I'm going to make this a much shorter, smaller, potentially looped sample, and we're going to try and get a waveform out of where we're stopping. So you could do something like that, right? You could go right in to having just the audio from this brass into basically a waveform and turning that into the oscillator that we could then play up and down the keyboard. So right now you can see that if I'm playing a C on my keyboard, so let's have a look at the piano roll and see where I'm playing down here. So I'm currently playing a C1, so let's change that a little bit. C2, so there's my C3, right, on my MIDI keyboard, and we're on an A. So what we'd need to do is retune that, right? And an A is just 2 semitones away from a C, so we can go 3 semitones, and we need to go plus, and we arrive in our C, and we're almost dead in the green in the middle here, so we're going to use a little bit of sense also just to bring that in. So now we've got an instrument. That we could play up and down the keyboard, right? And we've tuned it so that when we're playing a C, we're getting a C back, right? And you can also, if you didn't have the tuner and it wasn't working, we could also use an EQ8. And we could check here as well with the EQ8 where we are octave-wise. So actually, I'm playing a C3. Let's just check that in the piano roll. Move myself down again on the octave on the MIDI controller. So let's just come back. So we're playing the C3. So there we are playing the C3, and we'll have a look here. And we're playing a little bit higher up here. So what we could do is reset this a little bit. So actually we go down from that A to the next C, which means we need to go all the way down to there. And you can see now I'm playing C3 and getting C4, so we'd need to go even further. And now I get a C3 and I'm playing a C3. So some tips there about how to turn it into a working instrument, right? So now my simpler is tuned to exactly the same octave and exactly the same pitch, the brass where I've stopped here, right? So if I move around in the sample, I might have to do that again, but for now where I stopped, I'm getting that tuning, right? So let's maybe do something kind of with where I stopped, and then we'll maybe work again away from that position in a moment and try out some other places as well. So let's come up here and let's maybe have something like a little bit of a few triads here. We might move these positions around in a moment. And let's say just something simple for a second. Get ourselves rolling. By the way, if you are here in the live stream, that is, you're tuned in and listening, do drop a comment in the chat, say hello, ask any questions if you have any, and I'll do my best to answer them. Maybe we'll keep that rhythm change actually. So again, that's kind of come out of that So let's say if we now sort of work on our brass sample that's in here that we've turned into chords at the moment. So let's use the tools that we have again just to clean it up a little bit. So a bit of EQ. Let's add some effects to that. Let's have a little bit of reverb. So in this case, we'll go for a bit of hybrid. Let's also chop this one up maybe. So not a bad sort of sound coming from how we got there, right? We sort of homed in on this little waveform in the brass sample. We've looped it up out of this big long sample. We've made sure that it was tuned to a C, so that if we're playing chords like we are now in the key, that it's actually, the sample is playing back in key, so we can play it like a real instrument. We've made an instrument from it. And now all I'm doing a little bit is just cleaning it up with some EQ, giving it a little bit of reverb so it has a little bit of vibe to it. Can also use all of the tools in the simpler, so let's round off the attack a little bit. We want it nice and plucky. So in a moment we'll kind of process that and get it a little bit more kind of interesting in terms of like some more vibe to it. Let's get some movement into it. Let's maybe have a little bit of roar in here. So these could be things we might automate in the future. Maybe a bit of echo as well. Don't forget where this came from. Like, again, it's just coming out of this, again, as I said, kind of simple sample, right? So that has now become what you're listening to. So there's kind of chord track, which I think is kind of interesting, right? So we've kind of taken that brass, decked the halls, and put it into a simpler, and we've kind of focused in on a section. We've tuned it all in so it works. We can play it up and down the keyboard. We're just using this little waveform, and now we're adding a bit of effects to it just to get a little bit of vibe to it. And I've also just done a very simple chord progression, nothing fancy, just a few chords. And that's what we have at the moment. Check our master track for a second. I don't need so much limiter anymore, but that's just for YouTube. Just a little bit more. Right, so what we could do in the case of making things a bit simpler is we can kind of duplicate this chord track over as we've got a working and I think this is a good idea to do. So to be honest, I don't know if that's the best section of that whole brass sample. It's just kind of where I stopped, which is interesting, but it works for now. And the thing is that I've already done all the tuning work, right? So if I duplicate it over, I'm not going to use the chord MIDI, but this could be now the beginning of a bass line to go with what we have so far, right? Because the work is done in the instrument itself. Let's just reset the envelope a bit though. But the tuning is done, which is the kind of key thing here. So we know that it's in key, and that's kind of what we're looking for here. So we can play it as an instrument, but we need to arm the right track. So let's arm the bass track. One thing I want to check on the chord track as well, just before I do that. Let's copy our rack over that we built. Okay, so there's a little bit of too much sides happening in this one, so what we're going to do is just bring in a utility and we'll just make this sound a little bit more mono. Let's pop a utility in here. Bring the width in a bit. And see, straight away we're back in the healthy zone here. And we've still got plenty of stereo, but we're not kind of hanging it right out there. That's going to mean that this track is going to work way better in mono with what I just did there, by the way. That's a little bit of a mixing tip. Let's bring this. Just a little bit of gentle compression for gluing that together as well. Okay, over to our bass track. Let me just see if I can get my monitoring a little bit tighter so that it's not quite so far apart from me playing and us hearing. I think I got one in there. Let's have a look at that. So we'll just do the capture. Find the best one. Nearly, might be that one. Not that one. This is the kind of rhythm I was going for. I kind of like this one and the one earlier, so maybe what I could do is actually try combining the two. So this section here, what we might do is just make a copy of this clip down so that we've got the option to come back to it in a moment if we destroy it, if I destroy it. So I'm going to take away those notes, try these ones that I played here. Let's see what that sounds like. It's this clip, sorry, wrong clip. Now I'm just going to do a little bit of manual movement here. Something like that. Okay, let's now work on the sound a little bit. So we're still using the same Deck the Halls brass little oscillator that we made out of choosing a section in the sample. Let's get a I'm just tuning in the sound a bit, working on the ADSR, the EQ, the filter. Might be the sort of bass we can add a bit of delay to as well. Let's reset our raw, but we're definitely going to have a bit of raw here. Let's maybe turn the raw into multi-band and just work on the mid and low band a bit. Let's try diode clipper. Okay, let's play around with these notes a little bit. Might not be nice as a variation there on that, so let's duplicate that down. Let's have one clip with some longer. Call this 2, it's got the longer notes. Call this 1, it's got the shorter notes. And we'll take the original loop that I recorded and played in down, pop it out the way, got it there as a backup. Maybe this first note. On there or later. Maybe I think starting. Let's try that with a kick. Funny, already like 2 better with the longer notes. Yep, definitely 2 for me. Let's maybe have a bit of a MIDI envelope modulating this filter frequency on the bass a little bit, so we can get a little bit of pluckiness on that. And we're just going to do it with an envelope MIDI. That way you can actually see what's going to happen. There is an envelope in the filter and simpler that we could turn on here, and there is a frequency envelope. We need to give it an amount, but I think if we use an ADSR over here to modulate this frequency cutoff a little bit, you'll actually see what's going on and get a feel for maybe what that's going to do a little bit more visually as well. So we can see it's kind of modulating in the background here. So let's maybe tone that down a bit so it doesn't close down quite so much. Bring the amount down. So that means the envelope closes right off. I quite like it how I had it. So the range it's working between. Well, let's do this with the chords a bit as well. Let's kind of continue to process them a little bit, get them a little bit more interesting as well. Let's have some movement on them. So let's get some chorusing on those. We'll have it in here before the raw, after the EQ. Maybe a bit of vibrato, we'll try that. So what we're doing, just adding a bit of wonkiness here. So it's slowly, that's more extreme, right? So you can kind of hear what I was doing. I'm just moving it around a little bit in pitch. It's modulating its pitch now a little bit with a bit of vibrato there. So there's a little bit of movement. Work a little bit here. Might actually make this slightly longer for the bass. Let's see. So what we might try and do with the bass, just for fun, is we're going to move this sample start point around and see if we can find something else, because we've got the bass pattern. Let's see what happens when we go exploring elsewhere in this lovely big long sample. Let's see if we can find another bass tone. So I'm just going to widen my loop. explore. Something in here. I like that. So we can bring that in again if we wish. So you can go right into that sort of tone if you wish, or we can come back out a bit. Okay, let's try a little delay on this bass. Just checking the comments there. Adrian, unfortunately, I have to leave and we'll watch the rest of the live stream later. As always, thanks for another fun stream. You're very welcome. I hope you're finding it interesting and entertaining as I dig around in these Christmas samples and come up with a bit of a music idea. Thanks a lot for joining me again today. All the best with your plans for the rest of the day. Have a great Sunday, Adrian, and I'll catch you again soon. Thanks for your comments. Yeah, I might come back with the bass pattern. I'm still not completely convinced on it, but I like the sound that we've got there. So let's explore maybe another bass pattern, but I'm just going to just draw one in just quickly. Just maybe even make sort of something like a little rolling bass. You know, I tried to come up with some sort of interesting rhythm that I played before, but I think just something as simple as that can work quite well, to be honest. Let's have some extra little notes. Just for a bit of extra groove. All right, I like that better. As I said, I tried to live with the bass that I played, but I just kind of felt like I wasn't quite working with the chords so well. So just put in a quick pattern here, just using again, we could definitely play around with plucky notes versus long notes. But we're still keeping the same sample, but now we've kind of got a new pattern which I think fits better. So I'm just going to turn off the track options. We don't need to see those anymore down the bottom there, since I'm not playing again for the moment. So let's move on. Let's get into what else we have in these packs here. So we've got, let's see if we can find in a similar way something like a melody from this sample. So what have we got? We've got Jolly Santa. What did Jolly Santa sound like originally? Coming back into this pack here, and we're looking at Jolly Santa. Okay. Again, fairly obvious sort of sample. So let's see what we could do with that in terms of a melody, actually. So let's get a new track, MIDI track. Let's get that sample in, and let's, just for the moment, have a simple note. Let's get ourselves back in A minor. I mean, we're in a white note scale. Keep it nice and simple today. And let's just have a note for a second. And we'll loop that up. And we'll just try and find a little sample somewhere in here. Let's again put it on C3. We might tune this into, again, the key so that we are good to go on that sense. So we did that with the chord track. So let's see what we find in this voice. So we got a nice synth tone in here somewhere. Let's see what that's showing on the tuner. Sounds nice and high to me, like a 4 or a 5. So let's see what we're getting there, and let's see what note we're getting, and then we can work from there. So almost an A, and we're in A minor. That's pretty cool, right? But at the moment, reminding myself, I've just got this single note on a C, right? So what we really want to see in here is a C, which is easy enough to tune. So let's tune it. We need to go up 3. But again, you know, and let's do a little bit of sense, minus, just to get it right in the center there. Great. So our note's tuned. We're playing a C, we're getting a C, but we're up quite high. And again, as I said, if we want to match in the octaves, we can put an EQ here, and we can see that we're right up here in C5. So we're going to need to have that +3, but we're going to need to come down a couple of octaves. So it's going to be like 20 minus 28 or something like that. So that was a bit too far. So the C above, this guy, whoops. A little bit more sense. And now we've got ourselves a tuned C3, and we're playing a C3. Happy days. Let's make it plucky. Clean it up with some EQ. get back over to our MIDI now. Turn this into a bit of a melodic idea or riff of some sort. Maybe keep that E down for now, but that's just a simple pattern. Let's again get some velocity randomize on it. Nice. So now we can kind of again get some effects into here. So we'd like also again a bit of vibe here. So let's have some I think I turned the echo off on the chords, which I did. So on this melody we could have a bit of echo. Just boost the volume up a bit on the main master track. I'm going to call this the melody. So the Jolly Santa's been turned into quite a nice little melody. Let's get some movement on that as well. Let's have some auto pan on this one. Let's make it a slow left to right. We could have that pre-echo. Nice with a bit of sustain, so maybe not plucky. Alright, so working our way along through the samples here. Again, this is all made from zero, all made from those very innocuous sample Santa Christmas samples. This is what we got so far all together. If you are joining the stream or you're in the stream, do say hello in the chat, drop us a comment, ask a question, feel free. The only thing for me that I'd like to sort of, you know, that I would instantly normally have another sample. And as I said, if you're doing an exercise like this, you're challenging yourself, you're getting some fairly ordinary sort of samples and trying to work with them and process them and turn them into something interesting. We're doing lots of sampling. We're using techniques here that are good to have in your locker in Ableton Live. The only thing I'd probably change here would be this kick for a nice beefy kind of sample kick, but I could layer this with instruments and kicks and things to make it beefier. But the whole thing is that in this pack, you know, there was some good percussion sounds, but there wasn't something quite so nice, low and bassy that would make the perfect kick. But we do have a decent kick. It's okay. But as I said, I quite like that to be a little bit more substantial. Probably in that case, I would swap it out. You know, as I said, I'm just trying to stay within the little rules I kind of set on myself here. All right, so what else have we got that we haven't used yet? We've got kind of this ornament sound and the other pine cones. Maybe what we can do is do something in actual audio, because we've got so far just all samplers and all drum samplers and simplers going on. Let's maybe find a sample in the pack and we'll do something with that, keeping it in audio. So there's a couple that have voices in them that are interesting. So in the pack here we have this children playing. We have that other one with children, and we have somewhere also shopping in a mall. This one here. So let's maybe start with that. We'll drop the other ones in as well. We can play around with them all really. But let's try and use these for a little bit of an Atmo kind of track that happens also in the track. So I think that's all those loops. Let's get stuck in. We'll need to warp it so we can loop it. Let's try it in something like Complex Pro. Let's keep it in beats. Let's make a really small loop in here. And I'm looking for sort of something kind of rhythmical a little bit. So that could be interesting as a little sort of rhythmical loop. Let's make it a little bit bigger so I can move this around a bit easier. And then we'll make it smaller in a moment. Well, there's a great hi-hat kind of loop right there. Play around with the preserved transient. Let's put it in 16ths. Let's get an EQ on that. So where's my little rack? I still didn't end up building a proper rack. Tried to do it earlier, but left lots of the things out of the rack. Let's just start this one copied over. And we'll turn the compressor off and let me just build this rack finally. It's a bit late now, but lots of the tools we kind of want. EQ, we do want a compressor. Let's reset it. We can see here again we've got a bit of stereo on this sample, which is good, but it's a little bit too much. So again, we can have a utility in here as well. So let me just have that rack like it is. I'm going to duplicate that, switch that off, and now I can copy that somewhere else if we need it again. We built one of those earlier today and we can just keep reusing it. So I'm just going to use the utility, bring width down a little bit. Get the sides again nicely under control, clean up the sample a bit. dial that in. Okay, and let's try a few things on this loop that we've got going now. Let's have a bit of resonator on here. Balance the resonator with the sample. Let's have an auto filter on this sample with some modulation. So we're going to make an LFO sweep around the cutoff a bit. Make it really slow. Okay, let's copy our chord track down. And let's make a variation of this. Let's try and see what happens if we chop this a bit. Quite like what happened here. Let me just copy that. So that's really nice. We've now got 2 chord clips as well. Take stock in a moment of what we've got here. So this is now this little kind of vocal atmo. Just gonna label that up. Because we've used that the way we've used it, we could maybe still use these children playing as well. Yeah, maybe we can also use one of these bell type percussion sounds as well. It sounds like there's room for that. Just seeing what else I could add to this idea. I'm already kind of happy with the main structure here. It's kind of sounding, I think, quite good, and we've got some alternative ideas here that we can kind of move around between it. If we were kind of moving this into an arrangement. So let's try out these other children's vocals, see if we can use them as sort of atmosphere. Yeah, I think that could make a nice atmosphere. So let's turn the warping on again to that. Let's put that in Complex Pro. We're not going to use the beat preservation here. We're just going to use it a bit more like a background layer. We can have a nice long loop of it. Or a short loop if we just... Okay. Let's turn off the original rack that was on the first track. Let's just make sure that it's still there. Yep, everything's fine. And this one we'll restart that, setting up this rack again. So some EQ to clean it up. Okay, I need to adjust again a little bit of the width with the utility. Let's compress it a bit. Catch any of those peaks. So now we've got a nice little sort of vocal atmosphere in the back. We need some reverb on that as well. So let's maybe add a hybrid to that. Rename this other track, it's more a vocal groove. Okay, let's maybe play around with this bell sound now. Excuse me. I kind of like it. kind of like it how it is, just kind of loose percussions that are playing around. But let's see what else we've got in there just to make sure. But I think there's room for one more layer. Could be that. Let's pop back to our Christmas samples and see what we've got. We've also got Santa's Ho Ho Ho's that we could maybe try and use. Kind of avoided that so far. More percussion of this kind of reindeer, sleigh bells. We're using that one already. Yeah, I think we'll just work with this loop that we've got here. So let's say a new MIDI track. Now we could do this a few ways. Again, we could put it in the drums. Actually, let's try that. Let's try back with our friend the drum sampler. Just kind of had a bit of a sudden idea. We could maybe do something a bit kind of weird with this. We could maybe use it, as I said, I quite like it how it is, playing just as a loop of kind of these nice bells. What is it actually called? The ornaments. Yeah, okay, so Christmas ornaments. Let's drop them into the drum sampler. And let's say that we just do some sort of simple MIDI pattern for the moment. Maybe we'll just do all 16ths and then we can randomize that a bit. What we could actually do is maybe already use, actually instead of this, let's just turn off a little bit of a few things here. Okay, so let's say we delete those notes and we use from the Ableton 12 MIDI tools, let's use generate and let's use rhythm. And then let's get ourselves a start point. Play around with this a bit. So let's maybe just start that again. It's not going to hurt anything. Alright, we'll just duplicate it in a moment. We'll just stick with the one bar workflow for this time being. Also, they're very low, so they're down. Where are we? B0 here. We don't want that. So let me start that again. Okay, and let's say we turn that off for a second. Start on the C3 up here. Let's try rolling the pattern again. We're just looking for something a little bit different here from, instead of sort of programming it, letting it happen a bit here. Okay, this time then, give me right across there. Better. Kind of like this. Let's change the velocity a bit. So we can get kind of ghost notes in there. down the top of the velocity a bit, bring down the bottom a bit, so the range is working between those. And let's try shifting the accent around a bit, or that will shift the timing of the pattern. Let's try that first. I still quite like where we've got, so let's just try the accent moving around a bit. Okay, let's bring some other stuff in. Let's have a look at the start of this. So if you hold down your shift key when you're in the drum sampler and you move the start, you can see that you can zoom right in. And find the start of the sample. And now let's try out some of the more sort of wonky features here. Bring down some of this stuff again. That's what I was thinking, so get stuck in here with stretch or loop or something and kind of get some little bit of vibe out of it that I wouldn't have done typically other ways. And let's try maybe pitching it. Quite like it on the C for the moment. I don't actually know the tuning of it. I haven't checked that. We could see what kind of note we're getting back. The MIDI's on C3, so whatever pitch it's playing at, which we don't see on the tuner, but we could try an EQ, seems to fit from my ear in the scale. So it's predominantly up here somewhere. Seems to be more or less an E by the look of that. While we've got the EQ here as well, we can clean up all this junk down here. We don't need that. So if we want to repitch it, but I like it up there, so I'm going to keep it at an E. E fits in the scale, by the way. We're in white note scale, so we could definitely use an E. And let's try messing around again with this. Get something kind of a little bit different like that using the FX, the stretch. So we're kind of breaking up the grains. Almost sounds like a bit like a delay on there, which we might have anyway. Let's have a bit of reverb. And yeah, I was thinking the sound is also quite left biased, which you can see where I can kind of hear, and hopefully you can hear that as well. And we can also see the meters here. It's very much left-hand sided, a louder left signal than the right. Let's just have a look at that in a utility. Let's grab our rack actually. Where's my spare one of those? Here. Yeah, so a little bit of polarity doesn't hurt. Again, I'm following the sort of stronger side. So this sound is naturally going to get out of the way of things over on the right and the middle, so it's kind of like panned a bit to the left. which isn't a bad thing. Let's try a bit of spectral resonator on it. Also try corpus, just trying to sort of come up with a bit of an interesting sort of FXy sounds. A bit of stretch, bit of corpus, it's a little bit different. But still kind of maintaining the percussion of the original Christmas ornaments. Okay, so we've EQ'd that sound, got a little bit of corpus. Maybe a bit of spectrum. It's kind of cool, but we move away from the percussion when we go that direction. It becomes a new sound, right? And I think what I would do here is just have it happen. Only every now and then. So that's the ornament perk. I quite like that to sort of have some movement as well. Give it a bit of modulation on the delay. And I am just going to try pitching it down a little bit. right, so we'll just have a bit of a recap here. We're just going to take away the tracks we've not used in the end. Take a little look at what we've got going on here in a second. So that's a new kind of percussion track. Just going to color up my tracks so I know what is what. Hi-hats for me are yellow. Claps are green, but let's go for a brighter green. Kick and bass are red. No, it's a simple thing, folks, but if you color code stuff up, you will open up your projects and know exactly what is what every single time you go and start working on a project if you have a system that you always use in terms of what you color what with. Okay, let's say this vocal atmos. We're going to put that in a nice shade of pink. So what have we got? Well, we did start with a kick, and it's this Santa sneaking in sample. So all of this track has been built from scratch from this Christmas sample challenge folder of free samples. There was 3 packs. I've used a little bit from every one of them. So the kick started out live as, believe it or not, that sort of squeaky sample. It's ended up going into the drum sample. It's been repitched, it's been compressed a bit and EQ'd to bring out the kind of kick note as best as possible. It's possibly one of the weakest samples. As I said, there wasn't a super obvious kick sample in there. Sometimes something that's already bassy and low. So I've kind of extracted it. I've also used the sub oscillator in the FX section of the sampler to try and add a bit more juice. I then made a clap, and the clap came from the sample called Writing a Letter to Santa, which is like pen on paper pushing into a table. Sounds quite nice. The key with that one is, again, picking a sound sample point in there, adding some noise this time. So it's a little bit 808-ish, which is a tone, 808 snare, which is a tone with a noise on the top of it. It's kind of what's going on there. Then hi-hat number 1, which is Pine Cones, which is from this one. Those nice kind of crunchy sounds. And then open hi-hat, which is Carrots for Hungry Reindeer. That sounds like this. Oh, sorry, wrong one. This one, Grating Carrots. Nice. And then I kind of got stuck into chords, which is this Deck the Halls sample. Nice brass Deck the Halls, and I've kind of looped up a very tiny snippet of it, tuned it, turned it into an oscillator, and that's given me the chords. And then the melody track, I copied over that tuning and that brass sample. Actually, I didn't. Sorry, I'm on the melody track. For the bass, I did copy it over. But in the end, I actually just also went for moving and finding a new section in that long piece of brass to give us a new bass note. And then I did come up with the melody, which is Jolly Santa Laughing sample. Pretty crazy, really, when you hear what that sounds like. And then I've used a couple in audio just to show you how we can work with that as well. So we've got this toy shopping at the mall. So that's this loop. I've kind of looped up a very small section of it and then used it with beats preservation in 16th notes. So we get a really nice kind of like little rhythmical part to it. That's why it's called groove. And then we've got some filter movement and stuff to make it vibe a bit. And then there's this children vocal atmosphere, which I haven't really done a lot with other than loop it, boosted the volume a bit, and compressed, EQ'd, and cleaned it up. So what do we have in the end? Well, let's work our way through it. So if we just sort of listen to the drums for a second, we have this. And then if we add this new sort of vocal groove. And then the bass. And then the chords. And then the melody. Children atmosphere. Just low cutting it on the master track here for a bit of fun. Yeah, and there's plenty to work with there. I could hear some nice arrangements sort of happening here where things that play together and things that don't play together. So maybe the main break. Building back up to the drop. Playing around with the filter on the melody here, boosting the resonance. We can get really nice kind of almost acid kind of touch to this melody as well here. So there we go, folks. I mean, that is a little bit of a sample challenge turned into a musical idea in a couple of hours. I had fun doing it. I hope you had fun, for those of you that watch the stream live and for those of you who may be watching this back on replay. And I hope you take some things away from it. I hope you find it beneficial. It's good sometimes to get out the comfort zone and try things out, and doing a little challenge or exercise like this, it makes us get good at understanding how to clean samples up, how to use simplers and make instruments inside them using a sampler workflow, how to use the drum sampler. And just in general, as I said, challenge yourself, learn some things, figure stuff out. This could be a good track, I think, to maybe take and turn into an arrangement. I'll have a think about that. But of course, as always, if you'd like to see that, drop a comment and let me know. What I'll also do is put a video here at the end cards here that I'd strongly suggest, if you enjoyed this video, following on and watching that one next. I did a similar sample challenge early in the year, that time taking a pack of samples from NASA and again from scratch, taking all the different NASA sounds and turning them into a fun little, again, electronic progressive kind of track. So I'll stick a link to that at the end card here when I can, when YouTube has finished checking the stream. I wish you an amazing rest of your Sunday and of course coming week. And I'll be back with another live stream, I believe, next Sunday before Christmas. Hopefully some of you will be about and you'll be interested to join me and jump in. And if you've got any suggestions for things you'd like to see, again, drop them in the comments, let me know. And if you'd like to do this sample challenge yourself, I'm going to bundle up those sounds that I've used today and stick a link down in the video description that you can jump on and download the packet yourself. Have a go with those sounds and samples, and you can also share what your result is with me. I'd love to hear that, and we can share it with the community if you like. That's up to you. All right, have a fantastic rest of your Sunday. Take care and catch you in the next stream. Heath signing out. Ciao, guys and girls. Bye. Ciao, ciao.